So it's just a real quick. What? Oh, there you're all right. So we started last week. The scope of this chapter, as we review, is to confirm the promise of the restoration of the Jews. And so we see that it's picking up some of the same ideas as chapter 32. And though things seem hopeless, you will be restored. And so we see that there are 6 promises made. First of all, we see the city shall be rebuilt and reestablished in the status quo fashion in its former state. We see that in verses 1 through 6. We see the captives having their sins pardoned shall be restored. We see that in 7 through 8. We see that this shall contribute greatly to the glory of God. We see that in verse 9. We see the country shall have both joy and plenty. We see that in verses 10 through 14. We see that a way shall be made for the coming of the Messiah. We see that in verses 15 through 16. And then finally we see the house of David, the house of Levi, and the house of Israel shall flourish again and be established, all 3 in the kingdom of Christ. We see that in 17 through 26. So we dug in a little bit last week, and so we see that our timeline here, we see that it's not an exact time, but we can see that it was after the foregoing chapter when things were continuing to fall apart and growing worse and worse. And so we see, as we remember back 32, it was about on the 10-year mark of the 11 years that it took to take them down. So this is getting towards the end of it. And so we see that this is the second time that God spoke to Jeremiah while he was in prison to speak for the encouragement of his people. And so we thought about that a little bit, and we see that no matter where we're at, could be in prison, could be just in pits of despair like Jonah was in the belly of the whale. Wherever you're at, we see that God can reach you. And so we see that. So here we see that Jeremiah is in prison, watching his country just fall into the hands of the Chaldeans. And so we see God spoke to him. This judgment will pass, and I have good things in store for my people. Okay? And so this judgment's going to pass. This discipline will pass. I've got good things in store for you. Okay? So go tell the people that they will be restored. And so we see that now, and so we see that who it is that secures this comfort through them. We see that in verse 2. It is the Lord, the maker thereof, the Lord that formed it, that established it. We see that he is the one that secures this comfort to them, the maker of heaven and earth, all things above, all things in him, and all things below. We see that nothing is too hard for him. He built Jerusalem, and he can rebuild it again. And we see that he made you, he made us, right? And he can rebuild us as well. He does so from the inside out. And so now we see that every once in a while, we compared him to we see that we are the clay, he is the potter, and every once in a while he'll find a rock that he'll have to dig out, but he doesn't throw the clay away. He forms us to be a vessel of honor. And so we see that. And sometimes God has to soften up the clay, so to speak, right? He has to soften us up, discipline us, and then he can work us and mold us to be that vessel of honor. So we dug into that a little bit. And then we see verse 3 that this comfort must be obtained and fetched in by prayer. He says, call unto me, and I will answer thee. And so we see that back in chapter 32 that Jeremiah prayed, but here he must pray again. And we see that far too often that we as Christians will pray once, and when we don't get the answer that we want or an answer that we like, then we just quit. Right? We just quit. And so we think God doesn't care, or we don't hear his voice, when in reality we must continue to pray. He says, pray without ceasing. And we see that in 1 Thessalonians 5:17. We must call upon God, then he will answer us. Okay, now when God answers prayers, it is always for his glory and your good. And so we remembered Lazarus, Mary, and Martha in John 11:1 through 44. We just hit the highlights. We've seen that Lazarus was very sick, and then they asked Jesus to come heal him, and Jesus tarried longer, or where he was at, for 2 more days. Of course, Lazarus dies. Mary weeps and says, hey, you waited too long, okay? You've waited too long. You could have healed him, but now he's dead. And so Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, okay? And we see that Jesus waited so God would get the glory. We see that he had healed others before, but now he shows he has power over death itself. And so when Jesus speaks, we see that death must obey his voice. Excuse me. And so we see giving glory to the Father. And sometimes we see, as we finished up last week, sometimes God will answer yes to your prayer, saying, yes, it's too much for you to handle right now. I will take that away. Sometimes he'll answer no. He says, my grace is sufficient to get you through that. And sometimes he answers, wait, and not yet. And that's what we've seen in Jesus, in Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. And so the thing to remember as we closed up last week is that we mustn't give up praying, but to ask, okay? Ask for what we want and to continue to pray. Don't give up. Don't give up. So now, as we pick up, we'll pick up verses 4 through 5 here. Let's read them real quick. It says, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, concerning the houses of this city, and concerning the houses of the kings of Judah, which are thrown down by the mounts and by the sword. They came to fight with the Chaldeans, but it is to fill them with the dead bodies of men, whom I have slain in my anger and in my fury, for all whose wickedness I have hid my face from this city. Note the deplorable condition of Jerusalem, which made it necessary that such comforts as these should be provided for it, and notwithstanding which its restoration should be brought about in due time. The houses of this city, even those of the kings of Judah, are thrown down by the mounts and by the sword, by the engines of battery, and by the axes and the hammers of the enemy. Look with me real quick in Ezekiel 26:9. Ezekiel 26:9. Ezekiel 26:9. Ezekiel 26:9 says, and he shall set engines of war against thy walls, and with his axes he shall break down thy towers. And so we see that this is the same sort of language here in Jeremiah, that these houses are going to be thrown down by the mounts and by the sword. He shall set engines of war against thy walls, and with his axes, and he shall break down thy towers. It is the same word used here in Jeremiah. Even the strongest and stateliest houses, and those that were best furnished, were leveled to the ground. Doesn't matter, okay? You can have the nicest house on the block. It's going to be leveled to the ground. So let's try to get a picture of that in our mind. A place like the Biltmore House, okay? You guys who've been to the Biltmore House, it's a beautiful house, great house. And so we see that being leveled to the ground, utterly destroyed. Okay, just utterly destroyed by the enemy. And we can see that in our, just picture that. The stateliest house, a beautiful house like that, furnished and all that, just gone in an instant because of the enemy. And we see verse 5 comes in as a parenthesis, giving further instance of the present calamitous state of Jerusalem. They come to fight with the Chaldeans, but it is to fill them with the dead bodies of men, whom I have slain in mine anger and in my fury, for all whose wickedness I have hid my face from this city. Those that chose to fight the Chaldeans did more harm than good. They provoked the enemy to be more fierce and furious in their assaults, so much so that the houses of Jerusalem were filled with the dead bodies of men. Man, they poking the bear with a stick at this point. Okay, they're making the enemy more fierce and furious, and just doing more harm than they are good. God says that they were slain in his anger. Okay, slain in his anger. He is using the Chaldeans as instruments in his anger against his people here. He's using the Chaldeans as a disciplinary tool. Okay, and so we see that God's sword was the Chaldeans' sword. His anger was their anger, okay? And we see, and so we can see that, okay? He's using them as a tool. And again, here we see that everything is in God's control, okay? He had perfect control over this. He had control over the Chaldeans and how he was using them, okay? And so as they come in and God is using them, right? And they're taking over Israel and all that, and the people, and bringing them into captivity. He's using the Chaldeans, okay? Then later, as we've seen, that God will use the Medes and the Persians, okay, to take over the Chaldeans and whatnot. And so we can see that, okay? And so we see that he has everything in his perfect control, okay? Even Satan, okay? Even Satan must obey God, okay? Even he has to obey. Remember Job, okay? Remember when Kevin took us to the book of Job, okay? In the first couple of chapters, Satan came up and accusing Job, and God's like, okay, you can go this far, but no further, okay? You can go this far, but no further. You can, all right, take his family, but don't attack his health, okay? Isn't that what he did? You can attack his family, but do not attack his health, okay? The second time around, okay? Attack his health, but you can't kill him, okay? So we can see that Satan must obey. And so you can go this far, but no further. That's exactly what the Chaldeans are. You can go this far, but no further, okay? So we see God has complete control of it, okay? Notice that those men that were slain had distinguished themselves by their wickedness. And we see that. Okay, Brother Ty, you're good to go. But wickedness that God hid himself from the city and was just in doing so. Okay, we see the people had brought this upon themselves. Okay, the people had brought this upon themselves after many, many, many chances. Okay, God said, okay, that's enough, and judgment follows. Okay, and so we see that he had given them many, many, many chances. Okay. Even in our own lives, okay? Even those who are unsaved, okay? He's given them chance. He's passing by, okay? He's passing by, but he might not pass by again, okay? He's passing by, Brother Ronnie, but he might not pass again. He might not pass again. And so it's good when you feel him passing by your way. If you're unsaved, get saved right then, because he might not pass by again. And as we've seen in assembly, that if you have an unconfessed sin, it's breaking that fellowship. Yes, you're still saved, but you've broken that fellowship, and it's important to recognize that and to ask for forgiveness for that, to keep that fellowship intact. And so soon we'll see. Soon we'll see. The world will see his judgments come. Okay. Soon the world will see God's judgments come, because he's going to say the same thing. Okay? He's going to say the same thing. He's given the world many, 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 many chances. Okay? And soon God will say, okay, son, go get your bride. I'm done. Okay? That's what he says. He's going to say, go get her. Go get your bride. Okay? He's going to say that one day. And soon everyone will stand in judgment. Okay? Everyone will stand in judgment. You're like, not me, I'm saved. You're still going to stand in judgment. Okay, you're going to be at the judgment seat of Christ. Okay, and so even saved will stand in judgment, but it's the judgment seat of Christ. Unsaved will stand at the great white throne of judgment. Everyone will stand, and everyone will give an account of their lives. Okay, the judgment seat of Christ. You will be judged. Of course, you're saved, but you'll be judged on what you did for Christ while you were down here. The unsaved will be judged on their works, and they'll be found wanting. Okay? I'm reminded of Psalm 23. It says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay? But the unsaved, they will be found wanting. They'll be found wanting, and they'll have an awful blank where their name should have been in the Lamb's book of life. They will see that there's no name there. And he will say, and so we'll see that, will you stand ready? Will you stand ready at judgment? Or will God say, depart from me. Depart from me, ye that worketh iniquity, because I never knew you. Okay, you never had a personal relationship with me, so depart from me. I never knew you. Okay? And so we see that. Will you stand ready when it comes to judgment? Will you stand ready? Amen?